Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for a special Q&A of. We had so many questions from our fandom thread stream that we wanted to extend it to an extra Q&A, and we have Erik Brown here with us today, Mr. Jonny Franklin, Gaffer extraordinaire, and the one and only legendary Colin Anderson, who is the operator on the show. So all here to talk about this amazing set of questions that we have. So this is going to be like a lightning round, and we're just going to jump into it and start firing them off. So just want to start with some stuff here on the list, and thank you everyone for submitting questions. Magical moments. Just talk about some of the magical moments you might have had on the set. Well, every day on that show was magic, let me tell you, and it wasn't necessarily a pleasurable magical moment. It was. For myself personally, there was no like clicking magic. It was always interesting to see Reynolds Woodcock make a dress and some of the interaction between the actors. But when I think of magic, it was every show, every project has its challenges, and this had theirs. So yes, that's what I'm thinking. Magic for me, magic is that every day was a lot of fun. Jonny, I'm sure you had some magic that you were experiencing during that thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that show was magic, but I think during our time together, I think we and especially after watching rushes every night together and going through the whole process and having to feel every moment of if the film was there or not each day, I think we sort of grew a bond together as a team, and the process got a lot easier between us. We understood what we were all trying to achieve. So I think that process that got a lot easier between us all.
I think that's. I think you're right, Jonny. It's for me the magical moment was arriving on set in the morning and saying hi to Paul and judging his mood, and depending on how he answered, if he answered with a smile and a positive thought, then we knew it was going to be a magical day. Otherwise, we just retreated back and batten down the hatches.
Well, that's great that you say that, because it's like one of the other questions here is would love to know Paul's process from the moment you guys start working on a scene to the moment you decided you got it. And I remember that the process would basically start with Paul, the actors of the scene would be in the room, closed door, blocking it. Adam, the AD, would be in there. And he would have a lot of time with them to kind of work out what they wanted to do in the scene. And then we would get the invite to come in. And then I believe you and Colin, you and Paul would start to kind of formulate what the lens coverage and lensing was, correct?
Yeah. Paul loves working with a finder. And so he's generally got an idea, once he's done his private blocking with the actors, how he wants to shoot something. So when we get invited in, he'll sort of share that with us and, ask Erik for the finder. And then we'll basically, walk around and, look at various lenses, angles, decide whether we're going to move or not. And, we take it from there. But it's fairly collaborative, with Paul, because I think he trusts all of us, intimately now. So, we get a lot of leeway to make suggestions or or throw up an alternate, but generally Paul is the final say, and once we pick on something, we'll take it from there.
Definitely, because I know like he and I would have a conversation about lighting and talk about some of the concepts. Hey, windows or whatever. It's a lot of the kind of conversations that we'd have. I would have as a gaffer with a cinematographer, but he obviously had a lot of things on his plate. So then Jonny and I would be starting to figure out kind of what an overall game plan would be for it. And like you said, Colin, very collaborative. And I know that certainly Erik, I know he would, have a lot. You guys would always be discussing lenses, particulars about certain lenses, depending on what was going on too, not just millimeter.
Right. Well, I think, two things, two words. I would steal Colin's word, collaborative. And the other one I would say in terms of Paul's process is it's evolutionary. It develops as we go. So it's rarely defined, this is exactly what I want to do. It's way more organic and creative than that. And I think that we are all there for a reason, and we try to alleviate a certain amount of technical stuff for Paul so that he can concentrate more with his actors and that creative process. And so it just sort of automatically evolves into a conversation with Colin about camera movement, framing, how to orchestrate a shot to tell the story. I start to talk to him more with Mike's help and Jonny's help about, lenses and stocks and how we're going to approach it, because you're just thinking it through. Like, okay, if we start this process, where are we going to end? Are we going to have enough light to shoot that stock once we come around here? Just the technical aspects of it then start to layer in, where we all are collaborating on that. And ultimately, it ends with Paul, and Paul's quick to say if he wants to do something or doesn't want to do something, but he will listen to all of us. And so I think those two words, I would say collaborative, and it's very evolving and evolutionary in its process.
Well, the wonderful thing about Paul, and you hit the nail on the head, Erik, is that he's an incredibly astute filmmaker, and technically he's right up there with the best of them. And Robert Ellsworth always used to joke that Paul knows enough just to be dangerous, or knows just enough to be dangerous. and it's kind of true, because Paul, knows his lenses, the sort of, and Erik gets into the lenses so deeply with Paul. He knows all their characteristics, and what one lens will sort of do better than another one. Different series of lenses, and not necessarily different focal lengths, but the different series, and the coatings, and how they react to like really bright windows, and and then the same way that he discusses lighting with Mike and Jonny. It's he's very astute, and sort of disregard that at your peril.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've never worked with a director who knew lenses the way Paul does. Who in terms of knowing focal lengths and field of view and all that is one thing, but the actual technical, Paul loves the technical aspect of the process. And I'm not just talking lenses, I'm talking film stocks, grain structure, the lighting. Most directors skew more towards the creative, artistic side, and Paul dives as deep as he dives into that pool, he dives as deep into the technical side of it. And that's really, for me and my personal experiences, that's really rare for a director to literally want to sit there and watch lens tests over and over and over, keep those in their archive, refer to them years later. I mean, that level you just don't deal with typically.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely talking about that for the next one. Like, let's dig up all the old tests from the master and from Inherent Vice and all this. And it sounds like hours of lens tests we're going to have to look at, which would be fantastic.
And since we're touched on lenses, let me just one question. Let me just quickly digress to one question that was asked about.
Yep.
We were talking about the lenses on the last session and the serial numbers and the little lens list we had. And somebody said, "Hey, did anybody get in trouble for putting those serial numbers out there?" And the short answer is no. That's not secret information. That we all share this information. I mean, I work on movies where somebody references a shot from another film. What lens was it? How was it done? We borrow and steal ideas all the time. And once upon a time, I worked with lens sets and cinematographers where that was their lens set. Say a particular set of anamorphic lenses from Panavision, and we would carry those from show to show to show. You can't do that in this day and age. There's just too many different shows shooting. The supply and demand just doesn't do that. So it's just that information really is to be shared, because there's oftentimes Paul wants to use a particular lens, that a lens he used on There Will Be Blood, and it's not available. It's on another show. So Dan Sasaki at Panavision, the master lens guru, will say, "Not a problem. I've got such and such a serial number. It's really similar. I'm going to change one element. It's going to look exactly the same." I mean, there's just a lot of fluidity in that. So no, that information is shared intentionally so that we can all discuss, and people can, I hope somebody else gets to use that lens and make a beautiful image and another beautiful film with it.
Yeah.
Exactly. One of the questions was asking if Paul relied much on storyboards or took much more an adaptive approach to framing up the scenes. He doesn't. I've never done anything with him where he's used storyboards. It's all kind of He's got it all kind of worked out already, or definitely wants it to evolve just there with the actors and kind of take a process, to let it happen there organically. And the other half to that question was, is there maybe an average number of takes he seems to do? I wonder how long it takes to get it on his films.
Colin.
Well, whenever we're doing Steadicam, it feels like we do 1 million takes.
Yes, of course.
But no, I mean, Paul doesn't have an excessive amount of takes. I would say, if I had to guess, between 6 and 9. But then it also depends on the scene.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you guys remember the scene in Reynolds's sort of like a sitting room in front of the fire, when him and Alma were sitting in front of the fire talking, and we would put a 1,000-foot mag on and turn the camera on, and we'd roll for 11 minutes and 14 seconds, and then we'd reload, and then we'd roll for another 11 minutes and 14 seconds, and rinse and repeat. And I remember that it was incredibly hot in the room. There was no air because the fire was using up all the oxygen. Erik had to stand up because otherwise he was going to fall asleep.
There we
go.
We admitted it. You were on during the live stream. We talked about this. We admitted it. There was some sleeping going on.
Oh my God! Loud snoring coming from Mike and Jonny. But
excuse me,
no.
And I think, Colin, I think in that particular situation, it's a classic example of Paul is fishing, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it was early in the relationship between these two actors and with the relationship in the film.
Yeah.
And he just kind of, it's like, let's see where this leads us and what path, because they were doing so well with each other, and it becomes this organic process. And sometimes things just click, and like you said, 6 to 9 takes, Paul feels like he's got what he wants. And other times maybe he has what he wants, but he just keeps going with it because things happen. And I guess that's, when you talk about magic, and I agree with all of you, I think, magic is a cumulative end result. I think each day was difficult because of everything you're trying to accomplish. And the magic is like afterwards going, wow, wasn't it great that he just threw Alma and Reynolds Woodcock in the scene at the Blackpool at the end of the New Year's Eve ball with the balloons. I mean, as we touched on, we were basically wrapping out, and there's a magic moment, but in the given moment, you didn't necessarily just stop and go, whoa, look at that.
Right.
It's all those sort of pithy sayings of opportunity is luck, meaning preparedness, or chance favors the bold, and it's just, if you bring the right people together and sort of create the right atmosphere, then yes, magic can happen at any point. But I think most of it was usually in retrospect. You look back and said, wow, we thought that was an epic fail in the given moment, but just that type of thing. So
just to get back to, I'm sorry, just to get back to, sort of, does Paul storyboard and come with sort of preconceived ideas? Forgive me, this is not a Phantom Thread story, but I think it's relevant. I remember on Inherent Vice, we shot for an entire morning on a scene. It was at a sort of like an outdoor cafe. I know it was Reese Witherspoon, and I can't remember who else it was.
That's right. We shot it up. Yep.
Yeah, so we shot,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, we shot a master, we shot overs, we shot singles, we did all the coverage, 2 shots, everything. From call time until lunchtime. And at lunch, Paul said, "Okay, great, everyone go and have lunch. And when we come back, we're starting again." And the shot became the two of them sitting on a park bench, and the camera starting way back, and it was just a long, slow dolly push all the way in, throughout the 4-minute scene, or however long the scene was. So, we'd worked for 6 hours and threw everything out and sort of rethought it completely, which is kind of a fairly typical Paul move.
Yeah, I was going to say a non-Phantom Thread story, but I remember when we did the master, and I didn't, of course, Joaquin was in full Freddie Quayle mode, and we didn't want to have anything to do with him. But near the end of the show, Joaquin shared this story with me when he said that they were when we were doing one of the first early days on that thing, and I think this was the first time the two of them had worked together and doing a lot of takes. And Joaquin was like, "This guy is just shooting tons of stuff. This is ridiculous, We'd like take 10, take 11. And then he comes up to him and he says, "Hey, Joaquin, I need you to change what you just did on that take was really good. I need you to change these few things. And on take 4, you did this little motion this way. Can you incorporate that in there, please?" And Joaquin was like, "Holy shit, I'm in all the way, man. This guy is on it." So, it's just one of those things, it's very interesting. But yeah.
And on that, along that line of thought, Mike, I know one of the questions was talking about the process or scheduling or timing and whatnot. And that's a classic example, what Colin brought up about that scene with Reese Witherspoon and Joaquin. And this is just true with Phantom Thread, with anything with Paul. And I remember distinctly this happening on The Master more than once. And it's just Paul's style. He is able, the time in a given day is very fluid. It's very unlike a normal show that's really structured by the clock, because Paul, I remember one day on The Master where he went in, as Mike said, as he often does with his actors, into the room to work things out. And they went into this room and we didn't see him for 6 hours. I mean, we were all like, what is going on? And they were just going through the process. And I thought, we're never going to make the day. What is the deal? And once we were finally all folded back in, Paul, they just had to figure out how it was really going to work. And Paul then said, "No, we're fine. I'm going to do this." It became a oneer. I mean, and it wasn't a oneer just to save time. It was because that was the best way to tell the story. Yeah. But that's classic Paul. It's very fluid in that regard. And sometimes you think, wow, we are spending a lot of time on this. We're going to be in trouble. And sometimes you are, but more often than not, Paul has a very clear idea of how he will, and he's more than willing to at times give up something for something else, to say to Adam Sumner and his producers, "No, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need that scene. So I want that day to go back to the atelier and reshoot," or whatever it is. It's very fluid in that regard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Someone was asking, there's a question about the testing, and just to talk a bit about the testing process. And I mean, testing, like we talked about in the live stream, testing starts, I mean, especially for this one, it started on several of the Haim and Radiohead videos. So sometimes we would, I think on Daydreaming Radiohead video, the main thing was we were testing for pushing on that and how much we could push the stock and find good results with that. And on a few of the Haim videos, we'd be testing, I remember one of them was testing a remote head to see if we could roll around the floor, so that when we shot in this space, in this, it's kind of like this kind of a floor, hey, how would this work out? And so he's often testing different technologies or different lenses and things like that in some of these different music videos we've done over the years. And it's all part of just like kind of collecting your film base of knowledge, really, is what it is with him. And I want to try these new lenses that Dan was recommending, and let's take a look at those, see if those are worth something. So it's definitely, there is never just it never seems like you're just shooting one of those projects just for the project. I mean, you are doing it, of course, for that, but it's also like there's also little gems that come out of that whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just there's the questions that are coming in on the live, just as people are asking, and if you have questions, please type them on in. Do you guys remember what lens was used on the 2 shot of Daniel Day, Reynolds and Vicky walking in the town at Blue Hour? I think that's when they were walking into the village, after their date and stuff like this, and he's walking her in. I don't know. I can't remember any of that. Colin?
I'm trying to think of the shot of them walking into town.
Yeah, remember where the outside? It's the camera. The camera's outside there, outside her parents' house, and he's walking her back after their date. And I think the scene that didn't really make the movie, but there's a shot from it.
That's right.
Yeah. And kind of shot it like early morning, so it looks kind of like dawn. This is kind of right after they had walked along.
I think we did a push in. Did we do a push in at the end as she went up the stairs?
Yes.
We pushed in.
Yes. I think they might have cut that part out. But yeah.
And I think if I remember correctly, because of the time of day and the low light, I think it was one of the super speeds. One of our faster lenses, just because that was typically how things would evolve.
And reasonably wide, wasn't it, Erik? I think.
And it was. And I just, here again, sadly, I don't have camera reports available to me or our logbook, because we did keep track of all that.
35 or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking 35. And just for people listening, I mean, we do keep track of all that, because if you do have to go back and reshoot, or you want to, capture, and typically what happens is most of the camera logs, camera reports, all that ends up with editorial post-production or in an archive at some point. And so sadly, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly, but I'm almost certain it was one of the super speed lenses. As we had talked in the prior session, we'd often try to
on the wider
use
side,
those faster lenses on the wider side in those really low light environments, and then hopefully not have to shoot them wide open, just because the lenses looked a little better if we could just get off wide open a stop. But and then, as we touched on before, then Paul would often have very specific shots he wanted. One of the specialty lenses, 32 Cook Panchro, 40 Gordon Willis, 50 Pathé. But the standard workhorse lenses in the low light situations were usually those super speeds.
Here's a question. Being that your time was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to shoot at the London House of Woodcock, how much time on average did you have to prep, rig, and light that day's scene before you're rolling cameras on the actors? Oh my God, 5 minutes? No, it wasn't that bad. But we were certainly always, I mean, anytime we could work, we were working. It was like, even if they were in there rehearsing, we were trying to figure out strategies. I mean, I just remember it. Everything was compressed, I don't know.
It was generally a couple of hours, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, about an hour.
An hour and a half. Depending on the size of the setup.
And also, the beauty of being in that house is the fact that we had all of our kit in there. So, I mean, Colin, you could whisper to Erik once you're doing a block in, and Erik could then pass the message down to the camera guys, and they could be getting the camera ready and camera lighting. So there's that process that's happening. There's stuff going on while we're still discussing it.
I can't remember, Jonny. Did you leave everything rigged outside, coming in through the windows?
Yeah, that was all rigged.
It was all left there. Yeah.
It was just, we had it on track so that we could move it per shot if it was in shot or out of shot.
Right. Because a lot of the stuff came through the windows, and then you just had a couple of smaller units inside, didn't you?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, exactly. It was.
But I mean, we had months to set that house up, because obviously, as we said before, we had to rewire that whole house. So we were kind of quite prepared for quick access in that house to stick the lights up.
Someone is asking, this is a good one. This will bring back some memories. Can you guys talk about what it's like to capture one of those long shots, like when Reynolds proposes to Alma on the couch? Slow dolly it and slow zoom. So I have, this is auteur Paul Thomas Anderson lining up the shot as we speak.
He's like, table. Yeah.
That is that. I'm like, I remember him getting down there, and I was like, really? And so, yes, there you have it. He's always a fan, of course, of low shots to begin with, as you can see here. But this one, I remember this one was, it's a good thing you practice yoga, Colin, because this was a bit of a.
I think if I remember correctly, we had that on a track, because the floor in that house in Fitzroy Square was about 300 years old, and as wavy as anything. So we had to put a track down. So I remember in the beginning, I think I had to frame out the track, and then it was just an incredibly slow move. I think I was lying on the dolly, because of, we went through that table that Paul's, underneath there. And it was just an incredibly slow move all the way into the two of them on the couch. Yeah.
And I know we had I think we had like an M18 or something up on the truss. Yeah, like a little bit of hard light. We had introduced into that. It was one of the few times we actually really, kind of took advantage of some of that hard stuff we had. But
I think we shot that numerous times over a long enough period. Didn't we take it right into sort of twilight or sunset? I remember a pretty radical lighting change from the first take to the last take. One of those ones that was just spread over a very long period of time. And and there were a few times, not many, but a few times in the Fitzroy Square house where we did wait a little bit, like in the breakfast room, where we knew there was a hero window of time when the sun was at a certain point or something. And there were a few occasions where we did actually, like here in this room where we did wait.
Yeah.
Either the sun wasn't in quite the right position because we just didn't have the ability to do the kind of control you would on a bigger budget film.
Yeah, there was so little
Right.
control in this house because of the neighborhood, and really, normally we would have ways to control the intensity of the stuff outside the windows, like with neutral density or something like that, and that was just not an option. So we were constantly having to adjust interior illumination to keep the exterior in the right ratios and things like that, which, I mean, sometimes it worked great, sometimes it was bam, flat on the face. But most of the time we came up pretty good. Someone here is asking, do you guys do any shot list? Because I heard you guys don't do it. He doesn't really do a shot list. Like, I think there's no shot list like pre-thought of. It's more just like maybe there's a scribble down, hey, I'm thinking this after he's kind of worked it out with the actors. That's really the extent of it.
Yeah, I think if he's got a shot list, it's in his head because nothing's ever written down or shared with us. But we generally talk things through, and so we got an idea of what's coming up, but there's nothing as formal as a shot list.
And I think that the closest thing I ever saw to, which isn't a storyboard, but would be the closest thing, was on once in a while Paul would have a reference photo. Just something like when we did the still photo shoot where he had reference photos from a particular photographer of a particular era, where it was like, just to say, here, this is the idea. Never, this is what I want to do, or I want to copy this. It was more like, it's this feel, or it was like a reference. That would be the closest thing to a storyboard that I remember.
Yeah. Well, here's someone's asking, how are we able to mount the overhead LEDs in the ceilings without leaving behind damage? Oh, we left behind damage. No, that's why you have a construction department to go in there and clean it up.
Trust Johnny Franklin,
Johnny Franklin knows a really good plasterer in London.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, he's up there on himself doing it. No, we did leave damage, but this entire house was gutted when we started. So they had to remove quite a bit of stuff and do some finish work. So fortunately for us, we could always blame it on some other department. That's a lot of good question. What T-stop did we generally aim for? I think it was mainly around a 284 in that zone, depending, unless it was, sometimes we get radical. But
once in a while, Mike would whisper in my ear, what do we need to hold these to? Or if there was something where we were, working out a technical thing. I think we mentioned in the prior session, if anybody was listening, or were gluttons or punishment came back this time. But I think, Mike, you and Johnny were very consistent. Like once we established sort of a scene, you guys were very consistent, give and take all the issues of balancing with Mother Nature and stuff. But yeah, I would say sort of a 284 range was often. Granted, a lot of times we had to deviate from that, night work, twilight, dusk, dawn, things where you're, it is what it is, you're balancing. But 284 is probably a good sort of base working stop for most of it.
Someone's asking, between the Master Inherent Vice and Phantom Thread, which is the most logistically difficult in terms of shooting and lighting, and why? Oh my God, every one of those has its own challenges.
I was going to say, we probably all have a different answer.
I think it's down to two for me. It's
really? What do you got?
The Master and
Blood, so you got that one in there too. Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, just thinking in terms of logistics and everything. Like Phantom Thread was incredibly hard in the house. We had between 60 or 80 people in the house. Every department was packed into the house. Because you're shooting in a particular room, all the gear had to be somewhere else. But then our department had to be prepping the next set. So we'd have to move out of that room. So it became this massive jigsaw juggling act of where to put all the gear. And the Master was a little bit similar with the boat. I mean, trying to work our way around that boat, and
the Master had many locations too. The desert, the boat, different things. So I think you're right, Colin. It's just it's really hard to pick one that was infinitely more difficult for another. I think they all have unique challenges.
No, it's it's just not like a normal movie. I mean. And we've all had great other movie experiences, but these are definitely not normal. Let's see.
It's while you're looking at the next question, Mike, I'm just looking at the photo, and it just brings back many memories. looking at the lights and just even with some of the high ceilings, how difficult it was at times to light something that for Colin to keep him out of a shot because of all the moving shots and the way they were designed. I remember there were
none of those mirrors were gimbaled or anything like that.
No gimbaled mirror, and just constant struggle of how to light it and how to keep those lights out of the shots, especially in that Fitzroy house.
Yeah, because Paul likes shooting wide. You know, you'll notice with most of his films is nothing's really telephoto at all. You know, it's he likes to shoot wide. You know, when we're shooting, you know, even sort of close-ups on people, it's generally a wide lens close-up and very present. It's very, very seldom, Erik, do we put on a really long lens and do do telephoto stuff. Yeah,
it's usually for a very specific poignant moment that he's trying to say, because art department is obviously, as anybody knows who watches Paul's films, the art department is crucial, super important. So the environment is so important to these characters and the story that's being told that he wants to see it.
And he'll sit on a wide shot forever, you know, without cutting or going in for coverage, you know, which I love about him.
Yeah, no, it's very much an observational type of thing, which is great. Someone's asking, how much does lighting for 35 millimeter, 65 millimeter differ? I mean, I don't know. On my end, it was like, there's not a tremendous amount of difference. It's really, you just have to be able to prepare to light a little deeper for 65, because the lenses generally, at least especially the ones that we were always using, performed like really well in the 4, 5, 6 range. So you just have enough firepower to get to that point.
Yeah, and those older 65 lenses that we used on the Master were slower in general on some focal lengths, and also just the inherent the technical aspect of 65 having less depth of field because of that format. There were times sometimes we wanted to light it up more because we just needed a little more depth of field to hold focus on 2 characters or for some reason. So, but I think, as you're saying, Mike, ratio wise, balance wise, maybe not a big difference. You know, good lighting is good lighting. You know, depending on.
I think it's just that general rule with 65s that you just have to be able to go a bit higher. Like you might not want to, you might want to stay at the same stop, but you just have to have that ability to go a bit higher.
And we get into that often too. Jonny and Michael attest to this if we're shooting spherical versus anamorphic. I mean, the anamorphic lenses just typically tend to need a bit more light to really perform their best. So
does Paul cue any shots and music to the score? How's it? Well, yeah, totally. I mean, this one especially, music was so critical, and Jonny's score on this was like that. It started so early in the process. We go a little bit more into the depth into this in the live stream, but it's like music was always constantly playing. You know, during dailies, during all. I mean, you know, and he wouldn't just necessarily play all Jonny's music. I remember we were cranking. He had Beyonce going one time, and he had like just all sorts of different stuff. But music was a really critical building block on this.
Actually, going back to one of those magical moments, I remember when we had our first 35mm film projection of our rushes in the hotel, and it was and also he'd got Jonny to do some of the songs for us so that we could watch it with the songs. And that was one of the first times like we could actually sit there and enjoy what we'd done. And that was quite a magical moment.
He was just recorded it on his iPhone, I think, with like on a piano or something like that. And it wasn't even like stuff. It was just like, here's kind of a rough idea. It was pretty cool. Someone's asking about, do you talk about the scene where Alma comes in to help the women sew when Reynolds is sick? And this shot up now is from that when we did that dolly track all the way around, the circular dolly track. And I remember that was like the whole thing to work out because there were people in front and behind, and just the timing of the moment of when it came around. But it came together quite quick, if I remember correctly.
Mike, were you and Jonny, were you crossfading as we dolly around? Were you doing lighting cues?
I think we had something where we were bringing up a backlight and then we'd fade it out, but we just kind of kept this top ambience. I don't know, Jonny, you remember?
Yeah, because I remember.
So we had lights all the way around, and then we had the 2 top soft 12x12s or 8x8s, and then as Colin was going around, I think we were fading in the backlights so they weren't front lighting. Yeah,
because we had a real issue with camera shadow. You know, because times we were a couple of inches away. I mean, you can see in the picture there that the matte box would have been a couple of inches away from someone's back. You know, as we went behind them. So camera camera shadows were a massive issue. So yeah, I think you were taking out all the front light here.
Yeah. Someone's asking if there's a location that works perfectly in terms of aesthetics, but is inconvenient in terms of space for lighting. But what wins out, and how do you work with PTA to decide? Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
One of these locations in this film are practical. So it's like, and this was a whole conversation, and we talk a bit about it early on the stream, which is just that, like, Paul's very much, he loves to use, not only to shoot on film, but he loves to use like regular, what he calls real lights, meaning like, or HMI and tungsten, and which is great. That's cool. But, I mean, you're in a practical, you're in a room that's the size of, I don't know, maybe 10 by 10 or something. And it's like, yes, we can put a 2K there and do a nice bounce and all that beautiful stuff. But dude, you're going to have like 4 feet that's going to be out of the frame, So it's like, generally the need for whatever the frame is will win out the discussion. So, I mean, it'll always pop up the, let's just go to a 35 and take a look at this. And it's like, okay.
Well, there's not much compromising in Paul. So when he wants something, he generally gets it. And he doesn't really like no for an answer. And, so often he'll go for the aesthetically pleasing location or the shot that's going to look the best. And, he's not going to dumb something down just for his film or for the sake of ease or simplicity. So, we're often caught in tricky situations.
And Fitzroy Square, that house was a brilliant location. I mean, it was really, really difficult for everything we talked about in the prior session, the logistics, the time you were allowed in, what you could and couldn't do. I mean, it was really difficult location, but it was so integral to the story and it worked so well. But it was 5 floors total, 4 or 5.
Yeah,
and
5, I think. Yeah.
5 floors, and we shot on every floor, sometimes on 4 out of the 5 floors on any given day, and there's no elevator. Every piece of equipment you see in every one of these photos was hand carried, and 3 of the floors were connected by a very narrow circular staircase, or just a narrow staircase up to the top floor. And so from a film crew standpoint, it was really difficult, but it was the right call for the story. I mean, it worked so well. So classic example.
You definitely got your steps in during the course of a day.
Yeah.
Somebody asked us just about some exposure and film stock questions. Yes, we took the 500 tungsten stock, and we started it with pushing it to 800, and then we backed that off to 640 because we just seemed to be like better results. Because it wasn't just the push that we were doing, but there was also a lot of elements like we talked about. It's between the glass and smoke we were using, and we had low con filters every now and then, and there was just a lot of stuff there to get a lot of texture in front of the lens. So most of the film was rated at 640 ASA, but pushed to stop, and then so it was overexposed a bit. But and then I just used a Sony A7S to take digital stills, and it just did some tests to kind of get the viewfinder, the screen on the back, to be look similar to kind of what would be happening with the film. So we were using that as kind of like our exposure meter, because it took a few days off and to get dailies back. So we wanted to make sure we were doing things right, even though sometimes there were some screw ups. But we won't talk about that anyway. But somebody also asked about humor on set, and we use a lot of it. We have to. And it's not because it's just because, you're standing, film sets, you stand with everybody for like forever, and, you better have some laughs because,
and you better have thick skin, because we all took our turns at being, poked at, in terms of the humor, it's like, we're all, for the humor element, we're all quick to throw each other under the bus. so
yes.
No, it's your fault.
Absolutely. A couple other quick questions. This is one. How did you did a more unusual camera move like the tilt diagonally in Barbara Rose sequence come about? Barbara Rose sequence must be. Is this when they're trying to steal that? I wonder if this is. I don't know. Okay. Well, think about that one. I'll go to another one.
Yeah, I wonder what that is. I'm trying to think. Barbara Rose is in the hotel room or for the
I don't
wedding?
know. It doesn't say.
Yeah.
It doesn't say. But
Remember.
there's his shots evolve. They certainly do. I mean, like, there's a whole sequence with this that we shot, which didn't make the movie, but part of that wedding reception. When she passes out, Barbara Rose passes out drunk. We had this whole dance sequence we had shot too, which is really quite lovely, where her newfound husband is off already dancing with somebody else.
And Mike, touching on that, I know people had asked questions about the storyline and the directions it takes and whatnot, deleted scenes, and there are a lot of deleted scenes because that's just part of Paul's process. He's exploring all these avenues, and I mean, I don't think even Paul necessarily knew exactly how the relationship was going to develop between Alma and Reynolds Woodcock. So we explored a lot of different avenues throughout the course of it, and all these ancillary characters and backstory to Reynolds Woodcock, his many ex-wives, his children, scenes where he was delivering, sewing materials and stuff to his ex-wives for the kids to play with, and things that just when all was, I mean, there's just a lot of pieces that were parts of stories that I think Paul plays with, and you just, they in the end they didn't have a place or didn't tell the story the way he wanted to tell it. But I know people had asked about that, and I mean, we literally could do a 2.5-hour session about deleted scenes in terms of that process. It's just, that is Paul's process. You explore a lot of avenues, even within the given script. I mean, that maybe the script doesn't take you there, but Paul starts to shoot a scene and it just goes there. So you go along for the ride.
Definitely. How long do we shoot for schedule wise? I think we started at like 58 days, and then we ended up doing like, another 10 on top of that, maybe. I don't know. It was
in the 60s, somewhere in the 60s rings a bell. 60s, I think.
Yeah. So it was. We shot in the House of Woodcock for probably, I think it was like 4 weeks or 5 weeks inside the house. Did a couple of weeks out in the Cotswolds. And then a week up on in Staithe and all that area up in
Yorkshire.
Yorkshire. Yeah, exactly.
A week in Switzerland, was it? I think.
Oh yes.
At the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is that nice scene. So all that boat stuff we shot out.
Yep.
He's not. I know. Here's the thing. He's not afraid to this is beautiful and this is amazing, but you know what? It doesn't work. Get it out of here.
Yeah.
Hey there. We're just in the pile. See ya. Yeah. So regarding that tilt angle diagonal shot, Barbara Rose talking about the scene in the hotel room with her in the bed. I got some pictures of that. I think that was handheld, actually.
Handheld, absolutely. That was Colin
when she's pulling the dress off of her. Yeah.
The lead up, which I don't think made the final cut, the lead up with her, the getting in the door and letting him in and the cuts, but then it all became handheld once they barged.
That's right. Back. That's right. Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
All handheld. Yep.
Yes. There's
it's easier to do it on your shoulder. You can.
Well, especially because it was very all right, let's get this room this way. There's
right.
Let's see. Oh, geez. Questions are flying in. Is there oh yes, very curious about the light fixture Jonny mentioned me with his dad, the purpose behind it. All right, come on, let's get old Betsy up here. Our favorite, the Medusa. I got a picture of it. Let's see, I gotta find it here. That thing was a classic and total. There we go. Here it is. This is this. Now you might look at this and think, "This is what is this? This is ridiculous." But this was we used the hell out of this thing in this movie.
Yeah, we did.
Fire, it
evolved quite a lot as well, I think, because I think we added stuff to it.
Yes, exactly.
But the whole thing, this is a firelight, and the whole thing is to basically have bulbs in different positions to try create a realistic fire effect, and you basically set it to different channels. So I think there was 5 different channels within there that we'd set up, and you'd flicker them between the channels. But it was just a nice effect. It worked well with your bling light as well, that you brought over. It's just that it's a very hard effect, especially back then when LEDs weren't so advanced. it's quite a hard effect to achieve to create realistic fire. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually created this for one of my horror films when I used to make them back in the day.
Did any of your horror lighting skills come into play on this movie?
I
don't know.
But I think all of that stuff is useful. I think anyone that wants to learn light, I think you just need to go out and try it. Just do it for yourself and figure it out. The whole process of all of this is you just have to. The only way to do it is to learn is to do the stuff that you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
figure it out.
And a setup like this is something that Paul would absolutely love because he loves low tech. And,
like this thing. Look at this thing. We had to build it. We built 2 of these things. I don't even know, which is something that was based off of the guy who shot all of.
What on earth is that?
What do you mean, Colin? This is now a museum someplace. No, it's just based. I'm going to totally myth this, but a French cinematographer who used to shoot like Beauty and the Beast way back in the day. I'm totally blanking, but anyway, he had this whole idea about using tinfoil and lights, and you get stuff out of this. So of course, I don't even know if that's even true, but that was the marching order. So we came up with this crazy thing. And, we use bling lights too, which are these things, which is a collection of bulbs and stuff like that. Really, organic sources like that, those tend to bring a smile. So, yeah. We'll just do 2 more questions in the interest of time. It seems like it was a very intimate set overall. Can you talk about how few people there were on some days and minimal crew? I mean, as Adam would call it, the dirty dozen. It was pretty small.
If Paul could have his way, there'd be 5 people on set, and they generally are. It's normally Erik, myself, Mike, or Jonny, and a dolly grip and a boom swinger, and that's about it. I'm probably leaving 1 or 2 people out, but
script supervisor,
yeah. But right. He doesn't tolerate hair and makeup coming in between takes. If something has to be adjusted or moved, it's Paul that does it, or one of us.
Or one of us.
The smaller the better. Very quiet, very concentrated. It's a very concentrated work sort of environment, and And I'm a big fan of it. I think it works really well. It's nothing drives me more crazy than when you as you finish a take, people just flood onto the set, and there's 10, 15 minutes before the next take, and Paul doesn't tolerate that, and I'm a big fan of it as well. I think it makes for very efficient filmmaking. When you when it's small and quiet and concentrated. It's I think it's the way to go.
I mean, Paul treats the set as a sacred environment, and if it's the crew set, that's one thing. But once an actor steps onto set, it's Paul's set and it's their set, and it's go time. And hence his feeling, as you touched on, Colin, is that if an actor's on set, they're camera ready. They're not hair and makeup or wardrobe doesn't come in and tweak. Then they step on set, they're ready to be photographed.
And between Erik and I, we've always got to be absolutely ready, because just one look from him, he'll just say, "Turn the camera on,"
exactly.
And you just start rolling,
And often it's not even a word. Paul just has finger gestures.
Yeah, he just we'll just go.
Whether it's for the dolly grip, and you have to just be paying attention all the time.
The actors often don't know it. You're just rolling. Yeah.
Well,
he's grabbing stuff.
The picture that's up right now with Paul at the lens and Colin looking at the monitor, I think we're probably rolling. Like, Paul would get on the eyepiece, and if he saw something he liked, he'd just turn it on. Sometimes sound didn't know. Johnny didn't know. It would be until Paul caught the corner of your eye. And
be like this,
like fix that light or whatever.
So let me just say, in this particular shot, Reynolds was actually plucking his nose hairs. And I clearly remember it. I was like,
absolutely.
I looked through a couple of takes, and I was like, holy shit, he's actually doing it. Like I could see him like plucking them. And it's like there was no movie plucking there. He was actually doing it, which is so typical of Reynolds as well. He's
our man is all method.
He does it. Yeah.
There's no take two.
Exactly.
Many of the wide shots play out in a single take. do you guys all shoot coverage of those scenes? Or did you move to film the wide shot? I've done, certainly, I know in the master, there's been moments, and I think there was on Phantom Thread too, where he's just very comfortable with the master and a wide tracking shot. And you'll spend time arranging extras and things. And Adam Sumner, who's the AD, works very tightly with him about, hey, let's get across here. Let's do this, and really build the scene that way. And there's times you're like, oh, we're going to go in and get a piece of coverage here. And he'll be like, no, I'm good. And I mean, well,
that's what I love about Paul. He's so brave, it's, because he, if you've got a good script and great actors, it's, you don't have to cut. You don't have to keep on going in for coverage. And it's so brave just to sort of trust your words, trust your actors, and let it play. And I think audiences respond to that. You become engrossed in the story, and you don't need to. I'm not trying to talk editors out of a job, but often,
like Dylan saved us.
Yeah.
And I don't recall ever going back, on any of the projects where it was a situation of, oh, we need to pick up a reverse or this, like something. I don't recall that ever happening, that we would reshoot a scene, but it would be because Paul wanted to change the writing, or it was a performance related thing or something, but it was never coverage, never about coverage or lack thereof. And so,
exactly.
As you say, he's incredibly confident when he says, I got what I want. And that might be just the master shot.
How, Colin, here's a question, and you and Erik can probably answer this. There's talking about a scene in a restaurant with Alma and Reynolds that violates the 180-degree rule. Was that planned ahead of time or spontaneous inspiration? I guess.
Spontaneous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely spontaneous. Yeah. There's what we sort of alluded to earlier is that that Paul will come in and find shots and angles and work it out with the actors, but there's none of that is planned beforehand. And and he's such as I've said, he's such a great filmmaker that that there's no ways that it wouldn't work, no matter what rule you're violating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always there's things are always happening, and it's always a fun journey. So and hopefully, and we'll. I'm glad you said what you did, Colin, about him liking the small crew, because he's going to use that against us on this next one. I'll tell you that right now. Having done a couple of days of scouting, yes, it's going to be quite cozy. So yes,
we need to get more money.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, I think we've done an hour. Thank you all. This is certainly fantastic. Just seeing if there's any. All right, we'll do one more. That's it. One more. Jake's like, come on. Okay. There's a deleted scene. Alma and Reynolds are on vacation on a boat with mountains in the background. It looks like front projection, was it? No, sirree. We were bouncing around out in that boat in the middle of some lake in Switzerland. It was big fun.
Stunningly beautiful.
Stunningly beautiful.
That's why it looks like projection. It was postcard, picturesque, perfect.
Beautiful light.
Yeah.
Oh, that as well. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Provided by nature. So yeah.
No trickery. It was a real deal.
Not to take anything away from Jonny. Yeah.
I think I remember putting a sheet down at one point and just getting the eyes from Paul, and then I had to slowly go in and pull it away.
Yeah, let's link out of the frame. Absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, I think thanks everyone
thank you
for joining today. This is great, and it's a good journey. And we'll I guess when we get on the next one, we'll do one of these in a few years about the next one.
Yeah.
But thank you all. Thank you, Jonny, Colin, and Erik. And
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And
thank you, Lux Lighting.
Yeah.
On to the next one. Here we go.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Be safe, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
And thank you, Jake and Phoebe. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.